First of all, I'd introduce you to Lynne Currie, who's the Head of Privacy Innovation at the ICO. So Lynne sat in the middle there. Professor Sonia Livingstone. She's the first of the ones here which are essentially the recipients of our 2018 grants, and you're the project lead for your project, and all the other people that I'm going to mention, they're the project leads for their projects as well. So it's good to have as well Dr. Jim Longstaff of Teesside University. Jim's just here. And we've got Ed Johnson-Williams of the Open Rights Group as well. And sandwiched in the middle is Robert McCombe. He's the Senior Policy Officer with the Strategic Policy Projects team at the ICO. So we're going to play you a video now, which is a short film exploring both the programme and the projects from each of our panel members' own perspective, before asking a few questions of them. Okay, so we'll play the tape now. Thank you.
When we launched the Research Grants Programme in 2017, we wanted to promote good practice and we wanted to support independent, innovative research. But more than that, we wanted to give the vibrant research community here in the UK a stronger voice in how information rights evolve and how solutions can be found for privacy and data protection issues. I think we've started to achieve that. It was great to hear Professor Joe Kanatachi, the UN Special Rapporteur on Privacy, recently commend our work. Today, we're reporting back on some of the projects that the ICO supported in our inaugural funding program. There's Teesside University's project, providing citizens in the Northeast with a better way to share access to their health records. We'll hear from the Open Rights Group about their awareness-raising project to enhance data protection rights in the financial sector. But first, Sonia Livingstone of the London School of Economics will talk about her project to inform digital privacy skills for children, an extraordinarily important issue as we at the ICO continue our own work on age-appropriate design.
The ICO Grants Programme was designed to facilitate solutions to data protection facing UK consumers and business. These are some of the current projects underway with the programme. Children's online privacy was chosen by the London School of Economics. Determining how to share medical information and research securely was tackled at Teesside University, and the Open Rights Group were awarded funding to create a digital tool to help people enforce their data protection rights. Professor Sonia Livingstone and Dr. Maria Stoilova are based at the London School of Economics, and their project was to examine the evidence gaps in children's capacity to consent, their understanding of the commercial online environment, and the potential risks for them.
I think children are very interested in who knows what about them in the interpersonal sense. Their friends, their family, people they're going to meet, so they can imagine that a future employer, for example, will discover things about them that might worry them, that they will have done when they were young and not thinking about the future. But the bigger picture of commercial uses of their data, the kind of advertising market, the way in which data brokers are trading their profiles, they don't think about that much, and they're not really very clear what the risks might be, what could go wrong.
And children see the internet differently from how adults see it. They might sometimes see something as an opportunity that an adult might identify as a risk. For example, talking to strangers for them might be making new friends, while adults might think about the negatives of that. So when we talk to children, we actually get to see their perspective. We found a lot of gaps in relation to what we know about children. We realized that we mainly know about children and their relationships with people around them and privacy in relation to that, but we don't know about commercial privacy or institutional privacy and what children think about that. Do they consider it at all?
What the apps are doing with their data, what the digital environment is kind of taking from them, why they struggle with it in so many ways. They can't delete things when they thought they deleted. They're asked a lot of very peculiar questions about, read these terms and conditions, or have they changed their privacy settings. They're asked a lot of things that they may not understand very well. So they were keen to engage with us.
So then we designed a lot of child-friendly tools to ask children about these issues and to see how important privacy is for them and what kind of practices do they have when it comes to protecting their personal information online.
We are building an online toolkit that we hope children and their parents and teachers will use. So we want to make it kind of fun and accessible, and to include some resources, the answers to some of the questions that children really would love to have answered, and some ways of understanding what is behind the screen, the companies and their actions behind the screen that they otherwise don't really get told about. So we want to kind of make it real and visible and concrete for them, so they see better what decisions they do have some control over.
So the children got really engaged with the project. So we started to unfold the privacy questions in relation to their practices and to things that they were familiar with.
I'm really pleased that the ICO has funded research on children, because there's a lot of talk about people in general, internet users in general, and I really hope that this is the beginning of a much more kind of in-depth focus on children, families, and the needs actually of all of those who are struggling to understand the digital environment and to see what their kind of educational and regulatory requirements are.
Dr. Jim Longstaff leads a team at Teesside University, which is developing and evaluating a prototype software tool for capturing patient privacy preferences for their health and social care data. The project is being carried out in collaboration with teams developing the Great North Care Record, or GNCR. This system provides access to GP data for emergency departments and is to be developed into a full health information exchange.
Making patient data immediately available to clinicians and paramedics is very beneficial for providing correct treatment. Also, providing or donating data for research from the wealth of data in medical records can lead to major advances in treatments and drugs. So at Teesside, we're concerned with supporting the sharing of data for direct care, and we've developed and demonstrated concepts which gives the patient choice over how their data is shared. The software tool demonstrator has been implemented using the Mendix Rapid Development Tool, which enables changes and modifications to be quickly made. So after the initial development, 2 scoping sessions identified improvements which were implemented prior to the focus groups taking place. For our focus groups, the purpose was to evaluate the ease of use of our privacy preferences demonstrator. The group discussions afterwards centred mostly about the style of the user interface, and the younger participants wanted it to look more like an app. The importance of donating data was explained to the focus group participants, and they generally accepted this. Well, my prototype system allows patients to specify privacy preferences for direct care and then to test them by seeing their effect on their medical data. Reassurances to care professionals are that they will always be able to get their expected access to data, even if this involves using break glass overrides to reach restricted data or appeal to an appropriate authority. And naturally, all accesses and use of overrides are recorded and audited. My solution captures privacy directives at both fine and coarse grain levels of detail, to an extent which I don't think has been done before. At the conclusion of the project, the deliverables will be a tried and tested privacy tool user interface and software designs for implementing it. Thanks to the support from the Information Commissioner's Office, the system we have developed could be adapted to run in existing healthcare information systems.
Ed Johnson-Williams is a Policy and Research Officer at the Open Rights Group, who were awarded an ICO grant to develop an online tool to help people protect and enforce their data protection rights.
Well, we saw a real disconnect between the way in which ordinary members of the public understood their data protection rights and how data about them was being used by companies and other organisations. And we saw that the ICO was willing to support a project which tried to help people understand those rights and how their data is being used better. So what we made with Data Rights Finder was a site which tried to make the contents of privacy policies more understandable by ordinary people. So what Data Rights Finder does is that you can either look at companies or search for companies and then see what information is within the privacy policy of that company. So it would be a way to get a better understanding of how your bank, your insurance company, maybe a price comparison website would be collecting and using information about you and what you could do about that. So when we've shown this tool to people, we've asked them to use it, show us how they use it, and then what we found is that people find the tool really useful. Sometimes they're surprised by what their rights are, which is quite an interesting finding, and that suggests that maybe there's some further work to do to promote what the data protection rights that people have. We found that people they really think there's a problem with the way in which they're being informed at the moment about how data about them is used, and they'd like to have more control over that data. So yesterday I was sent a membership card from a company who I bought a bed from, and I, for the life of me, cannot remember asking them to become a member of this company. So I emailed them and saying, please stop this, because it's something I'm trying to control where my data goes, control my attention, because it's something that came in on the post. I spent my time and energy dealing with this. It's something that we want to ensure that there's respect and dignity for people and their data.
The Data Rights Finder tool features mainly organisations who are using the emerging fintech methods of using data for financial businesses.
We're seeing near instant decisions being made about who gets insurance, who gets a bank account, will you be allowed to take out a mortgage or not? And the data that's being used is not necessarily clear to the person who's applying for it. And you're not necessarily given a clear explanation for how your data is being used and how other sources of data, such as local crime rate, for example, with regards to a contents insurance application, for example. You don't know that's what the insurance company is building into their model to help make their quotation. What we found was that people don't think about their rights in the abstract. What they do is they experience problems, situations where they want to alleviate an issue, solve a problem, and then sometimes they will look for the tools to help them with that, and that's where we went with Data Rights Finder.
So I hope you all found that a really helpful briefing on the work that's underway there. Anybody here never been a child? Anybody here never been somebody's patient or have a medical record? Anybody here who isn't somebody's data subject somewhere? All these things really do touch on all of us in many ways, so it's really, really interesting to hear that, and I hope that's really whetted your appetite. Now, one of the worst things about hosting a day like this is that I have to keep an eye on the clock and time management. So we are running a little bit tight for time now, but there's no point in having this panel without being able to put some questions to them. So I'm going to use the host prerogative and pose a few questions myself to make sure that we keep ourselves on track, because I know there'll be a myriad of questions there. The good news is, though, we've dedicated a stand at which Sonia, Jim and Ed are presenting their wares, so to speak. So you'll be able to go and ask those detailed questions there. But first of all, I wanted to ask Lynne Currie, first of all, to put in context for us, really, a bit more about how the grants programme really supports the ICO's wider drive to innovation and regulation. So put it in some context, Lynne.
Yeah. So the innovation department is quite new at the ICO. We have been there since September last year, and we have been putting in a range of different teams and methods to support and facilitate innovators, both to try and remove the impression that regulation is a barrier to innovation, because it shouldn't be, and to help innovators to make their products and processes become real. So we have 4 teams, and Rob's team with the grants programme is part of the strategic policy projects team, and they look at the big innovation issues of the day, things that are things that innovators are wrestling with. So at the moment, there's a lot around AI, there's a lot around data ethics. And Rob's grants programme sits within that team because obviously research into the most interesting topics that innovators are grappling with should sit with the strategic issues that we look at. We then also have the Regulators Business Innovation Privacy Hub, which trips off the tongue. And that team is dedicated to working with other regulators who are working with businesses trying to innovate in areas that touch on personal data. And they have a stand in the information market if you're interested in finding out a bit more about what they're doing. We then have the Internet Economy team, which is working with the large tech companies who work in the digital markets and dealing with issues like internet harms, which you heard about from Margot James this morning. And finally, we have our DPIA team who work with innovators and companies that are looking to implement new types of processing and are finding that quite risky and want either our advice or help with that. So putting all of those together, we're hoping that we are both encouraging and promoting innovation right across the board.
Okay, thank you, Lynne. Okay, let's get some views from our researchers here today. I want to pose this same question to each of you, and I'll come to you in the same order as we did the video there, if that's okay. So you don't get as much notice of this, Sonia, as the other ones do, but anyhow. I'm just really interested because all of those really sparked lots of thoughts in my mind, and one of those thoughts was this wasn't easy. Mm-hmm. This isn't easy. So Sonia, first off, can you just tell me what's been the biggest challenge for you in doing this work? And then at the end of it, what could the delegates really help you with if they came and saw you on the stand? So what's the challenge and how can delegates help you here today?
Great questions. Thank you so much. Perhaps the biggest challenge for us was a point that I tried to make in the video, which is that we can think about children's data and privacy in relation to interpersonal sharing. Institutions, by which for kids we really meant schools and doctors, health services and so on, and then the commercial environment. So we walked into schools, we said, we want to talk to you about online privacy, and they thought it was e-safety. Oh no, miss, not more e-safety. They kind of rolled their eyes. And it really took some explanation to get them to see how their data is being collected and shared, not just in interpersonal context, but also in relation to the uses of their school, but particularly also the larger commercial environment. So just to give you one kind of example of the things that really it's vital to have a child-centered view. And I think about this also looking at data protection controllers who I understand are now obligated to explain to their users how data is being collected. So children tripped up on all the key words like privacy. Okay, so I think it's private. I'm only going to share it with the 50 people I know. I've got my privacy settings on. And then we explained, yes, it's private too in that interpersonal context, but that data is still being collected, it's still being mined, it might yet be shared, it might be part of their profiling in another context. So it's private, but it's not private. And they kind of, and that was the same for a number of things, like deleting. They could delete something from a profile. They could delete it so their friends couldn't see it anymore. That's what deletion looks like on the interface, but they kind of know, and they're learning, it isn't really deleted. What looks like deleted can be got back. What looks like it's been deleted might yet be part of a profiling or a data, part of a larger data economy. So our challenge in the research was getting kids to see that privacy is more than just the interpersonal. I think the challenge for everybody here is finding a language that works to even explain to children what that larger data ecology is and the other ways in which personal data might be shared and used, and how you could help me. We're building an online toolkit to try to explain the answers to kids, and it's been quite hard to find information and resources that are child-friendly beyond the e-safety world that even kind of maps out for them what does that data ecology look like, what do data brokers do, where does their data, any So we're looking for quizzes, we're looking for little videos, we're looking for, you know, kind of child-friendly, this is where your data goes. That's what kids want to know. Where does my data go? What is being done with it? You know, why is it someone else's business, what I do in my personal world? So any resources, fantastic. We're going to post them at myprivacy.uk.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Jim, a couple of key points there for you.
Right. Well, the functionality of our privacy preferences tool, which you saw an early version of on the screen, it already existed before the start of our project. There's numerous publications on the theory of how it was done, on attributes-based access control. But when we started to try to present this to normal, ordinary members of the public, ordinary patients, I personally had a huge difficulty in sort of expressing this in everyday language. You saw one screen there which was labelled the query dashboard. One big question is, what's a query? You know, what is a query in computer terms? And so the latest version talks about searching and questions. And so basically and another big difficulty was that people said that our system was too complex. Again, there's a huge amount of functionality there, but we now have two modes of operation. The first mode is where a member of the public could express a privacy preference basically by themselves. We've got lots of explanation and help and things like that. And then we'd imagine that if the patient, the member of the public, wanted to continue this, then they'd do this with advice from a clinician or an information specialist. And a further thing is that my personal view, which everybody doesn't really share, some people don't share, is that I don't think any of these preferences should be turned into permissions which actually control the access to data in GP records or local healthcare records or whatever, until people have been advised by a clinician. And indeed, I think the clinician themselves should actually enforce, should turn the preference into a permission where it actually does something.
Okay, thank you. Ed?
Yes, I suppose
you're not last but by no means least on this one. So, just a couple of key points there, thank you.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for me was the same challenge as ordinary users, ordinary data subjects have, which is accurately digesting information within privacy policies and the other forms of communication that we use to communicate how organisations are using personal data. I think what really should be happening is a renewed push on design, actually, and thinking about how we structure, both in terms of the language itself, making sure that it's comprehensible and understandable, but also in design elements like layout and whether the information is presented in a way in which users actually expect. So you see enormous differences in the way in which different organisations present privacy policies, for example. As an aside, I think we may want to have a conversation about whether privacy policy is the best title for this document. There's American research showing how most people don't fully understand what that phrase means, and they assume that it means that, and when they do have a view on what it means, they think that it means that a company doesn't share data with other companies. If you have a privacy policy, it means you don't share data with other companies, which we know isn't the case. So we may want to have a look into issues like that. What I'd like, and then the other thing to say is that what we'd want help with in the future is, I think what might be helpful would be an open, machine-readable standard about how organisations communicate, about how organisations use data, so that we could look at each individual organisation and you'd have the same data structure communicating, these are the types of data we collect, this is how it links to the purposes, here's the contact details for the data protection officer, and all of the other elements of privacy policies that we often see. But in order to make it usable by other organisations like ourselves, having that in a structured, common structure would be incredibly helpful.
Okay. Well, if that hasn't whetted your appetite for queuing up at their stand to ask a question, I don't know what has. There's a lot of points that
There's
come
not
out
many rooms in the country where you could say that.
No, that's true, absolutely. But before we finish, I want to ask Robert, not just because he doesn't feel left out on this one, but actually, this is a programme. It is not a year's effort. This is something that we're committed to. So Robert, can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming projects in the programme for 2019?
Absolutely. As we've noted, we've got the project leads joining us in the information market to answer more questions about the already excellent work that's been done. But we've also got the privilege of being joined by the most recent project leads who have just joined us. They're currently in amongst the audience, among you, but they will be at the information market. What we've got coming up this year is projects from Connection at St Martin's in the Field, looking at homeless data rights, understanding homeless people and how they view their own data rights and how they can better enact them. We've also got a project from the University of Oxford looking at privacy by design and how this can be better implemented in smart homes and all the systems that that implies. We've got PHG Foundation who are looking at the impact of GDPR and regulation on the use of genomic data. And last, but as already noted, very far from least, we've got Cardiff University who are looking at developing scalable training for UK researchers in how they use routine public sector data and how that can be put to best, effective and most appropriate use. So we're going to have all of these continuing alongside the projects you've heard about today, whilst we also continue to think about how we launch the third phase of the grants, what we want those to consider, and what the key areas of interest might be. And as ever, we're really interested to hear what you have to think on that.
Okay, thank you, Robert. As I say, time's against us, but there's so much food for thought there. So can you thank the panellists in the time-honoured way, please?